Welcome back to the PFRPA Podcast. I'm your host, Brian DeMarco, and today I am here with the Executive Director and CEO of the PFRPA, Mr. Bob Schmidt. Bob, how are you?
Couldn't be better, Brian.
Thanks for hanging with me on the show. Quite a privilege.
My privilege.
Right?
My privilege.
Not very often we get to sit down in this environment. Of course, we are here in Miami at Super Bowl 54. Being here, what does it mean to be here at the Super Bowl for you?
Well, Brian, without overstating the facts, I was at the first Super Bowl.
Wow.
I was down on the
machine.
I was on the field. It was in the Coliseum in Los Angeles.
Wow.
The reason I was there is because my close friend and teammate, Willie Wood, was playing defensive back for the Packers. I had friends on the other side of the ball with the Kansas City Chiefs, okay?
Wow.
Bobby Wilson, okay? So I made it my business to talk to both of them before the game in the warm-up area.
Right.
And I came over to the Chiefs side and said, Wilson, Schmidt, don't bother me right now.
It's kind of an important game.
And then I went over to see Willie. He said, Bobby, what's up? He was as relaxed and cool as a cucumber, okay? Anyway.
That was that.
It was a reflection of what was going to happen in the game.
So who was playing in that very first Super Bowl?
Chiefs and the Packers.
Oh,
okay.
That's right. That's been the 50 years it's been since the
first Super Bowl.
The Chiefs have been back. Oh my goodness.
And my brother Willie makes a key interception to change the whole course of the game. Brings it back like 54 yards to about the 5-yard line, and they scored. Okay, that changed the whole momentum of the game.
Wow.
Okay,
that's so cool. What a jeez, just a great memory. I mean, to be at the very first Super Bowl. That's and I think about that in from my point of view. I remember my first days in Jacksonville. Well, we got there, it was the inaugural team, so there was no team history, right? And so now when I talk to guys that play for the Jaguars now some 25 years later, going, wow, you were part of that first team all those years ago. So I get the feeling. So let's talk a little bit about your involvement, not just with retired players, of course, but your passion to serve here has really shown through. And I know personally, because we've been friends now for a long time, but your passion to serve retired players is unbelievable. And I know from my own personal experience, you being the guy on the phone with me back in the old days, trying to talk me through some tough spots. So what does it mean to you personally to be a part of solving this incredibly big problem for retired NFL players?
Well, Brian, I think it's a heavy question. I'll try and answer it as best I can. I think all of us are on a journey. My journey has been an unbelievable journey. I grew up in a little town at the time called Bakersfield, California. And if you'd have told me I'd end up in Washington, D.C., working for President Kennedy, becoming the head of the cable industry, one of the founders of C-SPAN, I'd tell you must be smoking something besides Camels, okay? Now, having said that, I think there are opportunities that present themselves. And in my case, I happened to be sitting in the courthouse in Minnesota when the judge slammed his hammer down and created a settlement. And he said, you have to create your own organization. And he kicks all the other lawyers out of the room. I happen to be a lawyer after I finished whatever I was doing in life. And I'm there as Willie Wood's guardian. And Jim Brown and Ron Mix and Lem Barney and all these legends who I'd gotten to know along the way, they were very good to Willie Wood. Back when Willie was first diagnosed with Alzheimer's dementia, I put on a fundraiser in Washington, D.C. for him, and most all of them showed up. They were other fellow Hall of Famers. Wow. Willie went in the Hall of Fame in '89, and it just made it clear to me that there was an attitude of assistance and aiding their brothers in battle, their brothers in combat, because football's combat, whether people understand it or not.
Yeah.
So Jim Brown and these folks turned to me, and I'm paraphrasing now, in so many words said, "Bob, you're the only guy in the room that can spell business. You need to be our executive director." And I politely said, "I'll help." I said, "I have 2 telecom companies. I don't need a job." They said, "We need your help." And I went home and told my wife, at that point of 49, 50 years, that I probably was going to come and get involved in this organization. She said, "Are you getting paid?" And I said, "There's no money yet. There's an appeal." She said, "Let me know if you ever get paid." So I've always said when these kind of situations occur, you don't measure them in dollars.
Yeah.
You measure them in, can I make a difference, okay? And did I have a background that could add value to create opportunities and betterment for players? And I said, I think it's time to do this. So because I spent most of my adult life in Washington, I had relationships in Washington. And Brian DeMarco was part of one of those relationships long before we created the PFRPA. And I saw the reaction in Congress when we put the issues on the table about the failure to deal with some of the issues that players were facing after they retired. And I said, I think we can make a difference. I think this organization can be an organization to affect change in attitude, change in results, and create a better life. Not that we need to go out and be morally justified, but do the right thing for players.
Yeah.
And I think that was, how it all came together.
So there's a, and obviously, on a very personal level, I share this very same feelings in the heart and passion behind serving our retired brothers. But for me, I think one of the things that needs to be addressed is from just a big picture standpoint of how people perceive a retired player. So there's a general assumption that no matter when you played, you made millions of dollars, you retired ridiculously wealthy, and then you somehow just blew your money. And, and I think especially as we're talking about guys in the pre-93 era, and we'll go to that in a second, but that's just not the case for most guys, right? Even though I played in the modern era, my salary my first year was $250,000. Now I did get a nice healthy signing bonus, but as people know, it's just not enough to last a lifetime, and especially if you have a medical issue or anything happening that's going to take away from that. Especially in those days when there was no insurance plan that was carrying over for 7 years or more. So guys were pretty much just left into the abyss after their playing days were over. And that's one of the things I love about the PFRPA, because really just starting to address some of those issues. But before we go on to that, let's talk a little bit about what you've seen in the reality of the life of a retired player.
Well, Brian, it's a complicated issue. I think that the evolution of pro football, from when I had a brief experience with the New York Titans, 1961, huge contract. I signed a contract for $2,500 and a $500 bonus. I'd have played for nothing. I wanted to do this. But then I had a realization come to my brain and my body, and I said, I don't think this is what I should be doing, not for those kind of huge dollars. But having said that, really, here's a business today that generates in excess of $15 billion annually.
Yeah.
It's big business, okay? But it's also a business today that's at the crossroads. I think the concussion issue has impacted the mothers of young men who are looking at what they hear and what they read and what they see and saying, I don't think I want my young lion to play this game.
Right.
Now, if you take that issue forward, that means the process and the development of athletes through Pop Warner through all the way up through high school, college, is going to be impacted, okay? The last thing we want to see in the PFRPA is this institution of football die. It has to adjust.
Yep.
It has to make some changes. One of the changes, and I've heard other people say this now, so I thought I was a lone wolf in the woods here. I played in 1957 at Notre Dame with the leather helmet. And people say, did it have flaps? Because their vision of that is something that has flaps like in the 20s. I said, no. It was a well-constructed leather helmet. And the important thing about that helmet, when you had impact, the impact was absorbed into the helmet. The current helmets today, unfortunately, for the most part, and I'm sure there are going to be some people who will disagree with me, transfer the impact into the brain, okay? And the helmet has evolved into a weapon, okay?
Yeah, certainly.
Now, with that said, I know that the military, and I know there's some thoughtful organizations, I know the University of Virginia is doing a lot of research on helmet design, and I know they're looking at materials that absorb the shock, okay? Yep. Now, with that said, I also believe that in my day, you had no face mask, okay? I remember the first time I had my nose broken, and they said, you're going to be fine. Well, about the second or third time I had my nose broken, they said, we'll get you a bar, you know? And I said, what's the bar going to do? It's going to allow the player to hit me above the bar and below the bar, okay? Yeah. And then the bar evolved into 2 bars. And then finally they put a face mask on. Yeah. And at that time they said, no, quarterbacks, running backs, wide receivers can't wear because they can't see, okay? So the only one who got face masks initially were the linemen.
Yeah.
Then that evolved into the – so I predict that sometime in the near future, and I don't want to give you a date, they will take the face mask off the helmet. What? Yeah. Now that's going to have a change. And then I also think it's possible that the helmet in its current design will be removed, okay? And we've done some statistical analysis of rugby, another very important contact sport. The incidence of concussion in rugby is less than 10% of what it is in American football. Sure. And you say, how can that be? The answer is because you protect your head. Right. You don't put your head where it's not supposed to be. Yeah. As a player, I can remember, because we played both ways, we were taught when you go to make impact, you turn your head at the last impact and take the impact on your shoulder. My sons, all of whom played and played professionally, were taught, drive the helmet into the sternum of the player. Excuse me? Something's going to give in that process, okay?
Yeah, certainly.
So I'm saying I think it's time to re-examine all aspects of the game, not just from the safety standpoint, but from the convincing of parents that this is a game that should be continued to be played.
Yeah, it has to. And it's funny, you mentioned the evolution of the helmet. It's something I talk about often. If we just watching the evolution of the helmet and the evolution of the concussion issue coming along, you're right. I mean, we were taught it was a weapon. We used it as a weapon every single day. And it was just taught that way, just part of the game. But I totally agree with you. But we know like the CTE issue is massive, right? And there's still a lot to be discovered on that end, and really how this is going to affect people and affect players. But one of the things I want to touch on from a health standpoint, and want to make sure this is clear with folks, because obviously my personal experience in this as well, that injured player this doesn't just affect one person. Right? There's always a family member. There's often a whole entire family, children that are involved, that are really highly affected by what's happening with the retired player. And it goes back to the importance of why the PFRPA is here. Okay? And I know we talk about these pillars of what it is that we are and what we're looking to stand for the player. One on the medical side, and of course we have the great vision plan and the great dental plan, and building on that always. I know you're in constant pursuit of new programs, but we also want to be able to impact the business side. And I know one of the things that we've done in the last year is the creation of the sub-brand Gridiron Gaming in the eSports world. why, in your opinion, obviously I know I was intimately involved with the building of that brand, but in your opinion, why eSports? Why is this important for the retired players?
Well, I have to back up and tell you, in my blessed career, I became an attorney, but more importantly, I became a businessman, okay? And I've always tried to pay attention to the marketplace and where trends are going. And when I looked around 3 or 4 years ago and I saw that the NBA, the NHL, auto racing, every sport that has some professional phase to it was getting into this thing called eSports. And I said, excuse me, I need to find out more about eSports. So as I looked further into it and I saw the kind of sponsorships that were being pursued and being participants, and I saw the dollars that were being talked about, I said, I think it's very important for retired players to be part of this new opportunity. Now, having said that, I didn't know enough about it, but I thought it's important to start doing the research, start digging. You folks were very helpful with your company, Drafter, and getting us cued into many aspects of that. But I reached out to a lot of folks because of my network and background in media, and we found that when you cut through all of the sizzle, what this really was down to was something very important. And it's something that every advertiser is looking for, and that is a better bang for their buck. Yeah. In my past, I was head of the cable industry from 75 to 80. I used to tell people I was cable before cable was cool. You know, we had less than 1 million subscribers in the whole country.
Wow.
But what we did is we started to create new programming, new platforms, and the advertising community did not think that broadcasting was the only form for which they could then reach consumers. So cable became a factor. And as the internet evolved, we saw more and more platforms being created. Now, having said that, I go back and say, target marketing. Well, I was told this as an example for if there's a event going on in the U.S. and they have the data of all the people who are watching from their internet platform, and you're one of those people and you're sitting in Bavaria and they know you like beer, they will send you a good German beer commercial, okay?
That's right.
So now that idea is so important to any consumer product that is trying to reach in a very careful way those people that they want as their customers. So now the other part of the story that I think is quite humorous, when we put on this event in Dallas in 2019, I had to secure some of my players to participate. And you got to understand, most of us had a difficulty understanding what eSports was.
Right.
So I convinced 2 of my Hall of Famers, Mr. Jack Youngblood and Mike Singletary, to participate. Now, their opponents in this match of Madden, the wonderful game of simulated football, were 2 young men who I know didn't shave. I don't know how long they'd been. I don't know how long they'd been out of diapers, but they were very young.
Yeah.
And I remember Youngblood was sitting at the council, and Singletary's over his shoulder, and he said, "What do I do now, Mike?"
Yeah, exactly.
And
I remember.
And as we watched this take place, I saw something that I thought was very important. I saw the interaction and relationship with young people who had no clue who these Hall of Famers were until maybe their parents or their grandparents enlightened them, to see the relationship and the connection. And I think that's the part that I think we can bring to this equation.
Yeah, because retired players, I think today's retired players get it a little bit more than players of my generation or past generations, but the importance of being out there in the public, getting involved with today's fans, and even though it's in a little bit different way through eSports, it provides an opportunity for these guys to really start building on their own personal brand, and that's one of the things that I love about what we're doing. This, the eSports brand, Gridiron Gaming, I just love the future of it. I see where it's going. I see the authenticity behind it and what the brand is looking to do of really getting involved with the gaming community. So I love that. But I think at the end of the day, this opportunity for players to build on their brand is going to be a key asset for them.
I don't disagree with that, Brian, but I also think that the idea that young people, and this is kind of a mixed reaction. I want young people not to become just gamers. I want them to become complete people. I want them to be able to communicate. So I think gaming is here to stay. I mean, it's
no question about that, yeah.
But I also heard that even current players, prior to kickoff in the stadium to which they're now going to engage, are gaming.
Oh, yeah.
And I was like, good golly.
Yeah, it's in every locker room. There's no doubt.
And therefore I say, all right, it's here. We better find out more about it. We better try to deal with it and create as much of a constructive relationship with it as possible. And then I had another awakening. One of my close friends is a retired 3-star admiral, and I'm sharing with him some of this information about gaming. And he said to me, Bob, whether you understand it or not, these young people who become proficient in this area are training up to be our new cyber warriors. And I was like, oh my gosh.
Yep.
So I'm saying there's so many other aspects to it that I'm just learning about, but nevertheless, I believe that because we have something to offer, we have value-added capacity with retired players, I think we can participate and become a very important cog in that wheel.
Yeah, for sure. Hey, so to move on from there, talk about business opportunities, and I heard you talking about earlier about creating the sustainability of the PFRPA. And I know that you're looking to launch a new program later this year, a licensing program. Now, as a small business owner myself, I'm particularly excited about this because most every business can't afford to be a part of the NFL and the licensing program and a part of this great game. And I think this is even, to be honest with you, in a lot of ways, a lot more exciting opportunity for brands to be involved with the game through the retired players. What's the licensing program?
Well, let me take your question and take it a step back, okay? You have to understand, when I walked into the media business, at first I was on the telephone side with ITT. Then I got into the content side with the cable industry. And what I saw was, it used to be, back in broadcasting days, in film days, you had to have this massive studio complex to do all of this, okay? Yeah. Well, in today's environment, if you have internet connection, you can create the same image with a green screen and create all of the visual effects that used to cost millions of dollars in production to put into place. Now, yep. With that said, the internet is part of our life also, okay? And it's not going away. And because of so many different applications and so many innovative ideas that are being brought forward by small businesses, they want to play and have the same kind of reach to reach their consumers. But if the cost of advertising or the cost of playing with the big boys is beyond their capacity, right, then they have to find other ways to do it. We're ready and available. Thank you very much.
Yeah, right. I like that. Ready and available. No, I love the idea of the program. Love where things are going with the PFRPA and its sub-brands with Gridiron Gaming, of course. this has been always an incredible opportunity to sit down and talk with you and kind of hear the nitty gritty behind the PFRPA. So thanks for hanging out with me today. And who you rooting for in the Super Bowl?
The winner.
The winner. Spoken like a true politician.
Yes, sir.
All right.
All right.
Thanks, Bob.
Thank you. Thank you.